This looks so formal. I want to thank you all for coming, and I welcome everybody to this meeting, this technical conference. The subject of which is EP 290 sub 4, the productivity decision. I have a few preliminary comments and then a few comments on the substance. The board is participating in today's conference through board staff. Statements made by staff do not constitute official board positions or policies, nor would any views expressed by staff today constitute legal precedent. While we hope to have a fruitful discussion, board staff will not be commenting on the merits of any proposals made by participants today, nor on the merits of the linking factor approach used in this decision. Board staff will seek to answer technical questions concerning the linking factor. Many of the board staff here today are working on this proceeding and will continue to do so after this technical conference. This technical conference is not like a mediation where board staff would be recused from later participation in the proceeding. Today's conference is being recorded and streamed live. A recording will be made as part of the public record for this proceeding. We have a microphone that will pass through the audience when people have questions, so please raise your hand and wait for the microphone before you ask your question or make your comment. While the board's work papers in this proceeding contain confidential information, we do not foresee any need to discuss confidential aspects of these work papers today. Participants should be mindful that the conference is public and is being streamed live and should refrain from disclosing any confidential information. Turning now to the substance. The STB and the ICC before it, in conjunction with FRA, have let a contract to collect a sample of the industry's waybills. This is the traffic database that the board uses in various proceedings, like today's proceeding, also in the RSAM, and it's an important input into IRCs. We also use it for studies, and outside parties will get the waybill to do their own studies as appropriate. Waybills do not have mileages. We need mileages in the waybill to cost it, to get the IRCs costs that we need. Previous years, ALK, a subcontractor, had used their proprietary methodology to add mileages. For this year, RailLink used a new methodology using trackside electronic signaling to provide the miles. RailLink did not include ALK in their contract this year. RailLink's new methodology should be more accurate. However, when STB received the sample, the mileages were different compared to previous years. STB tested similar moves in 2014 and 2015 and found the new methodology reduced miles by approximately 5%. Reduced miles mean that industry output measured in ton miles would be less simply because the mileage methodology had changed. To adjust for this discrepancy, STB created a linking factor as described in the decision. This matched 70% of the local movements and found mileages were approximately 5.2% lower. 2015 ton miles were then increased by approximately 5%. The board then did its annual productivity calculation. At this point, let me open this session up for discussion and questions. And as I said, we'll have the mic for people in the audience who want either to make a comment or ask a question of the board staff.
Don't be shy. That's what you're here for. Thank you. Somebody has to start. I guess someone does. Am I?
Is the microphone on? Okay.
It is? Okay. What are the restrictions, if any, on having RailLink perform a similar analysis using the actual mileages for the 2014 data, so there could be a apples to apples comparison?
Um, I think the issue is that contract ALK is not in place anymore. Have access to the.
If I can follow up, perhaps I was a bit abstruse. The idea would be that RailLink, using the RailLink actual metered measured data would do for 2014 what it did for 2015, so there could be a complete mileage calculation, and it all in both years would be done using the same technique and methodology.
Oh, I'm sorry. So as I understand it, you're suggesting applying the current miling methodology to the sample. You know, we can't comment on what the board would certainly, and Bill can respond to this, consider the feasibility of doing that.
Yeah, I think we'd have to take that under advisement and discuss it with our colleagues inside the board and our colleagues at RailLink, see if that's feasible.
I mean, we matched movements from the same origin, the same destination for hundreds of thousands of similar movements, and we found this 5.2% difference. There's no reason to the linking factor would seem an appropriate way to get over the minor discrepancy, which results in a minor change in measured productivity. To go back and do a different way to get apples to apples in a different way would, which would be certainly something that you should feel free to discuss, but. Bill has the microphone in case anybody would like to question or speak.
Maybe just a question on process. Are you waiting for us to direct the conversation to move through the calculations, or do you anticipate doing that sort of as part of the agenda? And I think we're sort of waiting for you to walk through the explanation of the analysis you've done on the mileage and then the linking factor, but I guess we could ask questions about that if you prefer.
Is that listed?
Certainly, it's legitimate for us to describe the process that we use to calculate the linking factor.
Looked at the 2000 and the previous year's waybill versus the current year's waybill. We matched movements, local movements. We found 400,000 matched pairs that had the same origin destination commodity combinations on the same railroad. And we found that some movements under the ALK miling methodology were bigger and some were smaller, which is not to be surprised at or wondered at all. Two different algorithms, both of them, an attempt to estimate something that's very difficult to estimate. We found on average there was a 5.2% reduction in miles using the new and we believe improved RailLink methodology. That implies a 5.2% reduction in ton miles, which implies a 5.2% reduction in productivity, which, if it went through, would seem to be the tentative number in our decision, because there's some concern that a reduction in productivity driven simply by a shift in miling methodology doesn't really reflect what happened out there in the real world. In the real world, the railroads were more or less productive based on real world events, not because of a shift in the miling methodology on the waybill. So our proposal is to create a linking factor to reflect the fact that the movement from one methodology to the other results in a shift. And that's all that our tentative number is seeking to do.
And so the board would clearly be interested in comments from parties on appropriateness of the linking factor that the board used, whether there are methodologies that parties believe are more appropriate, whether people have suggestions today or in the context of comments filed in the deadline specified in the order. It's up to the parties.
Next year, when the waybill comes in using the same methodology, it will be an apples to apples comparison, and the measured productivity at that point would be real as opposed to distorted by the shift in miling methodology.
With the 70% match, was that among single line movements, or was that 70% of the total movements?
We looked at local movements, and we matched 70% of the local movements, Michael?
We matched 70% of the records in the waybill sample. So you take all of the records, both local and non-local. And as Bill indicated, there were 400,000 records that were matched. There are about 666,000 records in the waybill sample in total.
Most movements are local. Most movements are not interchanged between carriers.
Was it possible or impossible to attempt to make a comparison for the interline movements?
I don't believe talk about why we made the particular choices that we made. We can explain what we did. Parties are free to comment on whether that was a valid choice or not.
I think we'd be very happy to hear if you think that the choice of simply local moves was appropriate, or if you have ideas about why we should include more or less.
Although given the sampling factors, it sometimes will prove difficult to find the matched set on both sides of a particular movement. So
can I ask you if you can explain the difficulty if you have, I don't think I'm saying anything confidential here. If a waybill is identified by a commodity code, an origin, and a destination, is the difficulty trying to figure out where the interchange might occur, or is there some other impediment?
I do believe that there are questions about where the interchanges are, that certainly when you use ALK's methodology, they hypothesize the best route. So it's not clear whether that was actually the best route. And whether the interchange was the real interchange or not is certainly an open question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess in my experience, I've noticed that when you look at a particular origin-destination pair, even if it is a local movement, that there will be sometimes between that pair there will be as many as several hundred routes that actually take place. And each of these will have a different mileage, obviously, and that with particularly the methodology that ALK used, which hypothesized an interchange location that you would miss a lot of miles because of the rebill phenomena in major interchange locations if you did not look at the actual miles. Given all of this and the fact that the hypothesis would be that RailLink would be doing something with actual miles on this, were there any discussions or were there any instructions from the board on? You mentioned with the ALK that it was presumably the shortest mileage. Were there any instructions? Were there any discussions on how to resolve this phenomena where you have a vast number of potential mileage routes and mileages between a single origin and destination?
As I understand it, ALK is no longer a participant in this particular contract that we have, and they were previously the subcontractor that RailLink used to develop their mileage estimate, and they had a proprietary algorithm that they used to estimate from point A to point B the distance. Now, you're obviously correct. There are more than one path many times between point A and point B. Many combinations of paths can get you across the network.
The ALK approach did not always choose the shortest path.
Nor would they, because the shortest path may not be based on what their information is. The heavy haul movements may go one way and the intermodal movements may go another way. They had, they were exercising some sort of discretion and judgment about what the actual movement was. We're not here to cast aspersion on either miling methodology, just the reality that there's a shift in the miles that are reported as a result of this change.
Well, no, what I'm trying to understand is that even with ALK choosing different routings for, say, different commodities or something like that, was the understanding that you would have that would be that it would be the actual miles for each route that would be reported, regardless of whether that meant that there might be multiple results for miles between a single origin and a single destination?
I'm not sure that the board had a particular understanding when the contract was renegotiated, or when the new contract was awarded, precisely what methodology would be used. It's my understanding that in the past it has been the contractor who has specified what the methodology would. Not necessarily be the case that the board would be involved in working with the contractor to develop that methodology.
Pedro, a shot.
That's correct. I think at a sort of a philosophical level, I don't think anyone believes that the miling on a particular waybill reflects the actual route that in the previous ALK technology that it used. That was the route it took on Tuesday, March 15th, but on Friday, March 17th, because of a flood, it went somewhere else. I don't think that there was any expectation that it was just a reasonable estimate of the amount of miles that moved from origin to destination, and given the law of large numbers, this was a reasonable way to go about estimating the particular miles. Of course, there are multiple routes, and their methodology presumably used some criteria to decide which route they thought was the most representative.
I think RailLink was telling FRA and STB that by using the electronic trackside monitors, they would get actual mileages instead of using ALK's methodology, which was based on algorithms.
And I think, as we explained in the order, our understanding is that by using actual location data, we would have a more accurate understanding of the route actually taken, and therefore a more accurate understanding of what the mileage would be. But for purposes of the linking factor discussion, the question is really how to bridge the years in different methodologies. As one of the bills said earlier, next year it's not an issue because the same methodology to calculate the miles will be used both this year and next year.
Yeah, as I said in my opening statement, it would be a change in output driven by just the change in a miling methodology, which didn't seem to make much sense. So that's why the linking factor was employed.
Well, see, the reason it's important to understand this is that it is likely that you would get a different type of result for the through traffic as opposed to the local traffic. Local traffic will give you different results just by itself. It may give you many different results, but the through traffic, almost by definition, will give you different results because of the rebilling process, and it would be a process that you would see dramatically in locations like Chicago, St. Louis, Memphis, New Orleans, to a lesser extent in other locations. But simply because you would miss a lot of terminal miles in the process from the going from billing to actual, if you could miss terminal miles if you were not getting the entire movement through the terminal. And so, how that methodology was applied is important to understand whether these miles are missing or not.
If I can ask another question following up on, I think, part of what Mr. Gray may have been asking about, is it the case that the rail-link data may show different mileages for different movements of the same commodity from one origin to another destination as a train gets routed one way for one reason, another way for another reason? And how is that accounted for? Do you match the first train of one way to the first train of another way and proceed that way and reflect the different distances that way, or is there averaging involved or some other adjustment?
Michael, you want to take that one? In terms of the 70% of the records that you matched.
Right.
How did you?
We did a weighting of the mileages by the number of tons on the record. What we would be doing then, of course, is to adjust the ton miles. So we weighted the average by the number of tons.
Thank you.
Just to ask a more general question, the board sort of observed this decrease in mileage year over year, 2014 and 2015. In the same year, it had a change in the mileage methodology, and so they sort of ascribed the difference to that change and did a linking factor. Did the board consider perhaps that there were year over year changes in the underlying data, 2014 and 2015, that may have driven some of the change as opposed to the methodological change? That gets back to sort of Robert's apples-to-apples question.
So the 70.
Yeah, I think the answer to that is that we've described what the board did in the decision, and if there are suggestions from the parties that there was a material change in the underlying traffic that could have accounted for part of the change in mileage differences, that would be of interest to the board, and that's something that we would like the parties to comment on.
To that end, does the board has the board considered whether or not it will make waybill data available to parties other than what may be contained in the work papers?
I think we would consider requests for more data as part of the work papers, waybill data beyond just what's in the work papers.
I guess, given the number of unknowns that we have floating around here, and the fact that there's a limited amount of information that we have available to understand, whether the results make sense or not. The suggestion that that we would have is simply that the only way you resolve that is by taking the new methodology and applying it to 2014, and then letting the results fall where they may.
So let me understand what you're saying. Taking the Rail-Link methodology that was employed in 2015 and apply it to data from 2014. And certainly take that under consideration.
And I guess one question would be just a feasibility question, and certainly the board doesn't have the answer to this question, whether Rail-Link has the data to do that next year.
2014.
I'm sorry, for 20.
Well, if there's no more questions or comments, I guess we could stand adjourned.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming.